Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to make my first comment always as that the meeting is being recorded. So we will have a permanent record of what everybody says here. Um, and and Rich, I was going to say one other difference that we're going to have that will carry forward here once we get back to normal and meeting in person is one of the features that we have every week, almost every week, is we have somebody from the media, from either a website or one of the fan sites or from the newspapers for whoever we're going to be playing that week. So this week it's Washington State, and they talk about the kind of the view from the other side, and that's always been a live phone interview. But from here on in, it's going to be live on Zoom. We'll broadcast it at the meeting. So Jeff Nusser is here with us tonight. There he's waving to us, and and this is the first time I've ever, he's been with us a number of times before. He's one of our regulars when we play Washington State, but I've never seen him. I didn't know what he looks like. So
I can get the audio to work on that.
So we've got it.
I mean, my Bluetooth headphones work great most of the time, and then
yeah. Okay. So welcome everybody. Thanks for for joining in. If I could ask everyone to mute, I think somebody is unmuted. So if I could ask everybody to mute, so until it's time to talk. Yeah, appreciate that. So anyways, welcome back. I think this is going to be a nicer way to start than the other times, in that we are beginning with a nice win, which is wonderful. So a good, nice win over Oregon this week. That was fun. In a couple of minutes here, we're going to go hear from Will Cooper, and I think that Will be having a little happier talk, being able to talk about a win. So again, welcome. So we have this week, we have Washington State, which is going to be played up in Washington State, where it's going to be a little bit chilly, I understand. And that game is going to be televised, obviously, on FS1 at 7:30. So make sure everybody is watching. All right, and the only other announcement I really have is next week is going to be our last regular season game. Maybe we get to a bowl game. I don't know. I don't think that's likely. I think we could certainly have the 3 wins, but there's not a large number of bowl games. A lot of them are more and more are being canceled. But our last regular season meeting will be next week, but it is going to be on Monday. It is Monday, so not our back to our Wednesday meeting. We're on Monday at 6 p.m. and we're going to have Dr. Marissa Nichols is going to be with us from the Cameron Institute, and I really hope that we have a big crowd for that. The Cameron Institute is an amazing program. It's just absolutely fantastic, and something I think you'll all be really interested in, and it's something that's really groundbreaking that we're being a real pace setter for. So I hope that that you'll be here for that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over to Will Cooper, and he's going to have happy talk about the Oregon game, I'm sure, and maybe talk a little bit about what's going on this week and any of the good dirt that's happening out of the athletic department. So Will, welcome back.
Yeah, glad to be here. Again, don't have too much for you guys, but definitely am excited about that win that we got over Oregon. So on the campus front of things, we did get some words from the chancellor recently, talking about the budget. The budget is, while there's a significant degree of short-term uncertainty, it's now clear that we must go beyond the budgetary steps being taken. Right now, we have been able to manage and mitigate approximately $140 million of the pandemic's $340 million budgetary impact. Moving forward, there's definitely going to be some furloughs and things of that nature to continue making sure that the campus budget is being taken care of. On a department front, we're continuing to refine and record our strategic plan. Throughout the strategic plan, we have 7 pillars that we're going off of through that strategic plan. And as of now, as we're getting to the end of this year, we've been going through and looking at that and just really looking at some of the things that we've hit throughout this year, and just going to continue to attack that, continue to build on that. Just recently, I believe it was on Saturday, Jim was able to send out the department a note, just kind of hitting on a little bit more of the kind of shelter in place order. And through that note, he had a quote from Dr. Lisa Hernandez of the City of Berkeley Health Office. And she said, "We are aligning completely with the state in terms of the shelter in place order. We will allow Cal to play their sports. They have a detailed return to play plan that I have reviewed and provided feedback, and they have been using that plan for several months. So you guys can feel comfortable that, we've been doing things the right way, taking the right precautions to make sure our athletes and coaches and all of our staff that are there doing things the right way in a safe way. And we'll just continue to keep on doing that until things change. And then on the football front, again, there's not much to say, but man, we eliminated, mistakes. We eliminated some turnovers, and the result we got was a win against, what I look at Oregon as the most athletic team. I feel like from top to bottom in the Pac-12 conference. So we played tough, we played physical. I would say the game ball goes to our defense. Good made so many great plays. Coin Ding was awesome. Was able to force some turnovers there to close out the game. So couldn't be prouder of that group. And let's just do it again for Washington State. We just want to go up there, play tough, play physical, limit the mistakes, keep our special teams under control, and hopefully make some good plays within our special teams units. And we feel comfortable that we'll come back with the win. So that's all we got from the athletic department there. If there's any other questions, again, if I don't know it, I'll try my best to get the answer. But that's pretty much what we got there, Gary. So thanks.
All right, thanks. Well, actually, I have a question. 3 times now in a couple of games, really, really good returns by Remigio got called back on penalties. What's going on?
Yeah, special teams is tough. It takes a lot of focus and a lot of effort, and it's just so easy to make some mistakes. You could be thinking that you're blocking your butt off, man, and that defender may be getting past you. You may be holding on just a little bit too long, and so that's it. It's just we just got to continue to work on those things, at practice. And I still think that we're due. We're due that return, by Remigio. So we may be seeing that, against Washington State as we continue to work out the kinks.
Yeah, Remigio's got to be getting a little frustrated. He had 2 touchdowns called back, and then that other good run. Okay, we do have a couple of questions here in chat from Paul. Are any players out or questionable for Saturday's game?
Good question. I was not made privy to that, so I'm not sure. If we can just go off of the history that we've had in this shortened season, I'm pretty sure there'll be someone out, but I haven't been made privy to that.
Okay, and then Tom has a question. Did the coaching staff make an issue of the failure to penalize Oregon for their several physical hits on Remigio during the game?
Not that I know of. Football is a very, very physical sport. But I haven't heard that there will be any complaints or anything made to the Pac-12 on those hits. Those were some pretty big hits, but no, not that I know of that there will be any complaints made to the Pac-12.
Okay. Yeah, he kind of followed up. Yeah, because he said it was unnecessary roughness for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, and from Joe, why didn't Cal try field goals late in the game?
Yeah, and more specifically, when it was 4th and 5, had an opportunity with 2 minutes left to go up by 7, pretty much as sure, nothing worse than overtime. Was it confidence in the offense to pick up the 5, or is there a lack of confidence in the special teams right now?
Again, I'm not sure, but I could say it may be a mixture of both. I think we wanted to, definitely make sure our offense has the confidence to go out there and get a first down. And there may be some, a little bit of hesitancy in the special teams with what has gone on. I can't speak to it specifically, or one thing it could be is just confidence in the defense as well, to where if we can't pick up that first down, we're confident that our defense can make a stop and stop their offense. So could be a number of things.
Okay, I'll take one more here. Rick wants to know any updates to Cal's relationship with Under Armour.
Yeah, that's a good question. We kind of talked about it a little bit today, especially if I'm not sure if you all seen it, but UCLA announced their partnership with the Jordan brand. So there were some people today. We had a staff meeting kind of asking about that and where we are. So I think from the understanding and the explanation today, their position with Under Armour was they were at a position of a little bit more weakness than we are. We have a little more strength and a little bit more we can stand on as we're working our relationship out with them. So right now it's looking like we're still in it with Under Armour really until further notice. There is a couple other, suitors possibly, but, I won't throw those out there. But right now we're trying to work things out with UA as much as we can.
Hey, Lisa, did Will answer your question before? Okay, great, thanks. And I'll take one last question here from Richard. How does the team prepare for a cold weather game, and what do they do to stay warm during the game?
Well, it's not a lot that you can do to prepare for it. When you're playing in a warmer climate and then you go to a cold one, you just try to prepare mentally. I'm pretty sure there'll be some heaters on the sideline, and they'll have the big jackets as well. But it's not a lot that you can do. You can't really simulate it. The weather, especially being down where we are compared to Washington State. So it's just more of having a mental toughness, getting everybody ready mentally. And I do believe they have like heaters and different things on the sideline to kind of help as well.
Okay, Will, thanks again. As always, good information. So appreciate your joining in.
Yep, thank you guys.
All right, and so right now, I'm going to go ahead and turn Nick. I believe you're here. Yeah, Nick is here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Nick to talk to Jeff Nusser with us.
Yeah, we've got Jeff here. Jeff is longtime contributor to Coug Center, one of the single best websites covering any particular Pac-12 team. I'd also recommend that you check out his podcast on Washington State sports generally. That's Podcast versus Everyone, correct, Jeff?
Yeah, that's it. That's the thing.
They longtime presence in the Pac-12 sports blogging community. And to start off, Jeff, so Washington State has played 3 games. 2 have been canceled. 1 had to be rescheduled. That is a very slim number of games with which to say anything with confidence about a new head coach. But with what little evidence you've seen, what do you think of the early stages of the Nick Rolovich era?
Yeah, well, first of all, 2 things. One, it's actually really good to be able to put your face with your name too. So that's part of the cool part of this as well. And then thank you for the nice words. Totally undeserved, but I appreciate that. Nick Rolovich, yeah, so far returns are good. He seems like you said, it's tough to draw too many conclusions. They were definitely prepared for Oregon State, which was great. That was the first game, and they looked a lot more prepared than the team that, was on their third year with their coach. So that aspect was great. Oregon, first half really good, second half, not as good. But it seems like he's getting a lot out of them. Getting good, production out of the guys that you would hope to get production out of. The transition, the big thing, people talk about this a lot, but I think it is a big deal. The transition from the run and shoot to from the air raid to the run and shoot it's not a seamless one in the sense that, the run and shoot is pretty different from the air raid conceptually, but they are sort of cousins in the way that they, obviously approach, attacking the field philosophically. So, the personnel has been able to stay consistent, and I feel like that has been helpful and useful. The big thing that's been a surprise is how effectively they've been able to run the ball. The USC game this weekend, honestly, that's sort of a, throw it out with the trash kind of deal, because it was such a disaster from turnovers to, USC's average starting field position was hour 40 on non-garbage drives. So good luck learning anything from a game like that. So, when we wanted to run the ball, though, we were able to. So that's definitely a big difference. And I think all of those things, I think fans really like that, especially fans. I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, but fans of a certain age, a lot of times have a particular idea about how the game of football should be played. And, throwing the ball 65 times maybe doesn't fit with that, feeling about how they feel about the game of football. And so that's kind of rankled a number of people with Leach. And so getting back to, at least it's still not balanced. We're still going to throw the ball 60% of the time, but to have an effective running attack, I think is getting people excited about where the program is. So yeah, so far so good. New defensive coordinator, defense seems, if not improved, it seems like at least they have an idea of what they're doing, which is definitely an improvement if it's not in terms of results. So, there certainly hasn't been anything that makes us think, that maybe this is going to go bad someday. What we've seen so far, I think, has us optimistic.
Now, on the COVID roster front, Cal had a situation where they had a game canceled and then played a couple games with missing half their starting offensive line. Mm-hmm. Washington State had a couple games canceled, then came back versus USC. You had enough players to play a game. Did you have a bunch of guys that were still held out? And are we going to see something close to a full roster this week?
So to answer both questions. So first of all, we were missing half our secondary, which is a really bad recipe against USC. Best passing attack in the conference, best set of receivers in the conference. We're already not great back there. We are not blessed with the kinds of guys that you guys have in the secondary. So missing half those guys, including our the guy who's probably our favorite player, Jalen Watson, who's a JUCO transfer, was originally committed to USC out of high school, didn't qualify, was committed to USC again out of junior college, didn't qualify, eventually got, I think, things squared away enough to come to Wazoo, and we were happy to take him. He's been our best guy. I've heard, so it's been reported, I don't know what the source of this is, but it's been reported that he has not been targeted. He was not targeted in the first two games. That might be true. That might not be true. But if it's not true, it really wasn't very many. Quarterbacks just haven't thrown his way. They've thrown to the other side of the field. So he was out for the game against USC. That was really problematic. So if there's any unit where missing half the guys is probably the worst unit for us, the defensive backfield is probably it. So, they don't talk about who's positive, who's whatever. I think it became pretty obvious that the defensive back group was the one where there was the COVID outbreak that was sort of the root of all of this and having enough guys to play. So I think the hope is that we're far enough away from that now that a bunch of those guys are out of the protocol and are able to play this weekend. So that was the only position group where it was really noticeable that a bunch of guys were missing. The rest of the position groups, there have been injuries. There have been transfers. Defensive line is really thin right now. We've had a couple of transfers. Guys just sort of announced in the middle of the season that they were transferring. I think they've also had a couple of COVID opt-outs that have happened during this whole process. And so defensive line is thin, but I don't think that's really going to change for this one. I think that's just going to be what it is. And everything else, I think, looked close to normal as near as I could tell. Running back is still kind of a situation with Max Borghi, whether he's healthy or not. I would not count on him playing this weekend, but who knows?
The other big change, obviously, for Washington State is a new quarterback. Jaden Delaura has looked quite excellent, particularly for a true freshman. In his first 2 games, had a rough outing against USC. What have you seen from his game so far? Kind of strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, he's a really exciting young player. And the funny thing was, the first couple games we were like, man, this guy does not play like a freshman. And then against USC, he totally played like a freshman. Like he was, made a turnover that wasn't, it wasn't really a total bonehead turnover. I don't know how many of you saw it, but the USC linebacker kind of sagged.
Joined the meeting.
He was going to rush, kind of sagged off. Delaura tried to hit a hot route while he was fading away, and linebacker tipped it up to himself and then ran it back, hurdling over Delaura on the return. Delaura tried to tackle him, hurdled over him, got down to about the 5-yard line. So really athletic play from the linebacker, which, okay, those things happen. And then, of course, USC scored again. So down 14-0, next drive, he tries to wedge a pass into a place where it has absolutely no business being, as he's sort of, or maybe it was at 21-0, something like that. But he starts feeling like, hey, I got to make something happen, kind of fell apart. But he got it back on the rails, for the rest of the game. He was replaced in the fourth quarter, but I felt like that was much more about, we have 2 other young quarterbacks, freshman and redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore. So trying to get those guys some reps, I felt like that was more about. So Delaura, what you're going to see, I'm presuming he's still the starter. I have no reason to think that they would bench him. The other 2 guys didn't light the world on fire, and I can't imagine that they want to bench the freshman that they went with out of the gate. As a true freshman, again, pretty composed other than that little first quarter against USC. Really mobile, athletic, really athletic kid. He's got kind of a wonky, loopy throwing motion. He looks like he's kind of putting his entire body into every throw, which is a little disarming for us after watching a whole bunch of really polished pocket passers for the last 8 years, basically. A lot of guys who stand back there very tall and throw. I guess it's probably similar to like what you guys had when Tedford was the coach, right? You just kind of cycling through these really polished pro style passers. Delaura is definitely not like that, but it works for him. He's reasonably accurate, throws a nice deep ball, doesn't have the strongest arm. We're kind of hoping that'll come along as time goes, but he's definitely not afraid to throw it vertical, and the run and shoot is definitely going to attack you vertically a lot more than the air raid was ever going to. So he's not afraid to take a shot if he feels like it's there. WCU's got some speedy receivers, so he's good to do that. But he'll definitely probably make you crazy a couple times. You guys crazy a couple times getting out of sacks that you feel like we got him, and then he escapes and scrambles for 5 to 10 yards. So really exciting player. We're really optimistic about his future, and it's really cool to have a freshman that you're building around.
Thanks. I'm looking through chat now to see if we've got any questions from the audience. Looks like we have a question from Andy.
Yeah, so don't want to bring up too sore of a subject, but I'm just curious what your perspective is on the whole Pac-12 North situation with UW. It looks like they may have some COVID issues and maybe won't be able to play Oregon and therefore win the division without having to play Oregon, or you guys for that matter.
Yeah.
Just curious what your fan base's take is on that.
Yeah, I think, so for us, the thing that is sort of like both comical and also like unfortunate. And look, I mean, COVID's not comedy, so I don't want to make light of a situation that is serious. I mean, it does hurt people, and people are dying. So I'm not trying to make too much of a light of that. But when WSU had their issue, some UW fans thought it was really nice to pop off about, hey, you guys why can't you keep control of your of your team. What's wrong with you? You know, you guys should forfeit because you guys suck and couldn't keep it together for an Apple Cup. You know, they say things like you couged it, which makes us want to punch them in the face, you know, stuff like that. And I live in Western Washington. So I am surrounded by Huskies. I'm also a high school teacher, which means I'm working from home right now. So I don't have to face as much of it as I normally would. But there was a lot of that. And then all of us were just looking at around each other going like, bro, this comes for everybody. Like this will come for everybody at some point. Nobody is going, if you've got 100 dudes, you know, getting in that close of contact with each other, and they're college kids, which are not, you know, typically the best, the best people at risk assessment. You know, it's going to happen to everybody. And sure enough, you know, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, you know, now UW's got it. And, you know, I do know this. I know that, so King County announced today. So King County is where Seattle is. So the CDC recently came out with their revised guidelines, right? 7 days, 10 days instead of 10 days and 14 days. But King County has said, nope, we're going to stick with the old one. And that has been the bugaboo that's gotten, you guys know, that's the bugaboo that knocks teams out for 2 games, basically, where it becomes really, really difficult to not have a 2-game break because you've got so many guys that came in contact and they got to sit for 2 weeks. So it becomes very difficult to play a game. So right now, you know, I'd be surprised if UW can even play in the championship game. Like, I don't think they're gonna be able to do it, because if they're like everybody, the only team that hasn't missed 2 games has been USC. And the only reason they were able to do it was because the game got pushed back to Sunday, you know, and they were able to squeeze in there with that Sunday change. So I don't know, man. You know, that Pac-12 championship game is supposed to be on a Friday. You know, I don't know. I don't see Washington making it for the next game, just if what everybody else has dealt with happens to them, which, you know, I don't think there's any reason to think that they're going to be any different. So, yeah. So, but to put it plainly, I'm not heartbroken that they would miss out on the Pac-12 championship game, if that's what you're really driving at. That does not break my heart.
Looks like we have a question from Rick that I'm not quite sure I understand, but I'll leave that to you, Rick. Rick, you are muted right now.
I've been there. It's okay.
Okay, I was going to ask, which is your favorite flavor, the Cougar Gold or another one?
Oh, the Cougar Gold. Yeah. So Cougar Gold always. I mean, that's just the plain. I mean, that's just the go-to move always. The other ones are good. So like, I'm trying to remember the exact name of it, but the spicy pepper jack that they've got is fantastic. The Viking is also awesome. Those are all great. The big thing to do is, so if we ever get to attend football games again, and any of you ever get up to Pullman, all of that is sold in our creamery right on campus. It's a campus creamery, and you can buy. So probably like where I'm at, if I go to a store to buy a tin of it, it costs about $50. It's like $22 if you buy it on campus. And then the other thing is, if you ever get up to campus and you go to Ferdinand's, which is where the creamery is, they've got ice cream also there that's fantastic. So I recommend the Apple Cup Crisp, which is basically an apple crisp ice cream. So there you go. But yeah, Cougar Gold. I mean, I'll put Cougar Gold on just about anything when I can get my hands on it at a reasonable price.
Yeah, Cougar Gold, the Wazoo cheese is cheese in a can, just because Nick didn't seem to be familiar with what it is.
Yeah.
Well-known cheese in a can.
It's fantastic. You can keep it for years too. You can put it in your fridge. Just leave it there for years. It'll age. Tastes great.
We got one last question, which I suppose was inevitable. I don't know if you have any particular insight into what weather we should expect to see on Saturday. And I'll just go ahead and add, in your experience, do teams coming into Pullman facing weather that, as anticipated on Saturday, do they tend to struggle as much as I might imagine they would?
You know, I think it's one of those things where we like to think that happens because we're like, oh, look at us. And so one thing you'll probably hear, so the last time we played a late night, really cold game was in 2018 against Arizona. Arizona comes up, Khalil Tate comes up, and we slaughter them 69-21 or whatever it was. I mean, We scored 42 points in the first half. It was a complete runaway train wreck. And, you know, a real popular narrative in that game was, WSU is, it's so cold. Arizona doesn't want to play in the cold. Well, I mean, Arizona just kind of sucked that year, right? And we were really good. So, that was part of it. I think, look, I mean, Cal, when Cal played up at our place 2 years, 2018, same year, that was not a great weather game. That was miserable. I was at that game. It was cold. It was wet. It was miserable for everybody. And Cal played okay. I think with better quarterback play, that game would have gone probably differently. So, I think we like to think that the weather makes a huge, massive difference. I honestly think it just kind of comes down to, the teams and how talented they are. And I think how well coached they are matters. I think Cal's a well-coached team. Wilcox, obviously really preaches toughness with your team. And so I think they'll be ready for the challenge. I don't think it's going to snow. That's what it looks like right now, that if there's going to be any snow, it's probably going to be a little earlier in the day. It is looking like it's going to be in the upper 20s at kickoff. So it's going to be cold. But I think, basically what you've got is, you've got a Cal team that I think, where your coach preaches toughness. You play a style that sort of feeds, that can succeed in that kind of weather. And so I don't know. I don't think it's going to play. I think it could, but I don't think it's going to have a major impact on the game. And WSU will try to hype it up as much as possible. But I don't know. I kind of think of it like a lot of things. I mean, look, we played the Apple Cup in the snow 2 years ago and got crushed by Washington. So, I don't know that we have any particular advantage from that.
So how we usually like to end these interviews. And of course,
Yeah.
That's particularly challenging in this goofy year where predictions are worth even less than they usually are. I also know how you generally feel about Washington State playing Cal in football. But I still have to ask, dare you hazard any predictions for the result on Saturday?
Yeah. So Nick and I follow each other on Twitter, and so Nick sees all of my Cal driven angst from these games, because I mean we like to call it the Cal baloney, where it's just like something bizarre is going to happen. I mean, ranging from wildfires to weird fumbles to strange turnovers to whatever. I mean, I referenced that game 2 years ago. We won that game, but really there was no business in that game being close. And of course it was, right? It wouldn't have been close if the guy who intercepted the ball hadn't fumbled it on the 2-yard line and out of the end zone for a touchback. I mean, just for whatever reason, weird stuff seems to happen. And it usually seems to favor Cal. So, and I don't know if you guys are used to that, but we just are like, whatever, this is how it goes. So, I will say that, I think the game's a toss-up. It's one possession either way. I'd be shocked if either team ran away with it. But I mean, if it's going to be a coin flip, I might as well go with my team at the coin flip. So I'll go 23-20 WSU.
By the way, I suppose it's cold comfort, but for us, Oregon State is that team.
There you go. Everybody has that team, right? And I don't think there's any kind of special juju. I think it's just, whatever the randomness of the universe, but for whatever reason, you guys are it for us.
Well, Jeff, thanks as always for sharing some of your time and insights with us.
Thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking to you guys.
Yeah. So hoping for a fun, entertaining game on Saturday. As weird as things are, I would actually kind of enjoy a snow game. So I'm kind of hoping it does snow.
Any other layer of weirdness is cool, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
Hey, take care, Jeff.
You too.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. And I just want to say, Jeff, that one thing I may disagree with Nick a little bit. I think our weirdness game is always Arizona. We always have weird things happen in the Arizona game.
Yeah, I won't argue with that, sadly.
Yeah. And then I have one question for you, Jeff. Are you still with us?
I think he checked out.
He checked out. Oh, okay. I was going to ask him if the beard was normal or if that's a pandemic beard, but I guess we'll never know.
He's had the beard before.
Oh, has he? Okay. I was just kind of curious about that. All right. Well, on to the main event. So our guest today is Rich Campbell. And Rich was an All-American quarterback for Cal as a senior in 1980. And he had a really interesting record against the Florida Gators. He completed 43 for 53 passes. That, I don't know, Nick, you might know whether that's a record that still stands. I would not be surprised if it does. I see him Googling. And then Rich was also a first round draft pick. Went number 6 in the draft and played with the Packers from 81 to 84. So a little bit before the meeting started, Rich was saying that he's got a lot of great stories for us. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to go ahead and introduce. Welcome, Rich. Are you able to unmute there? Let me see if I can. There you go.
There we go. See, I told you I needed IT help. Well, let me just say this is a real privilege for me to have a chance to chat with you folks this evening. I want to give a special thanks to Leslie Mitchell. I see you sitting out there, Leslie. Leslie and I have become Twitter friends over the last year or so. It's been a lot of fun for me to connect with her. And this year in particular, I've really had an opportunity to connect and reconnect with a number of Cal people, guys that I played with, people that I went to school with, and just the broader Cal community. And I wanted to be sure and invite any of you, if you're on Twitter, I would love for you to follow me. My handle is @RCampbellMC58, RCampbellMC58. Drop me a line. If you follow me, let me know that you're a Cal person, and I will most definitely follow you. We've had some real fun here during the season on Twitter. With the approach of the Stanford game a couple weeks back, I just randomly posted a query on Twitter for my Cal friends, asking where they were when the big play occurred, when the play occurred in 1982. And some of the answers to that were just fabulous. People talked about, unfortunately, leaving the stadium to get to the parking lot right before the play. There were some real sad stories, and also some great ones. People being in the stadium and kind of relaying just how exciting that play in 1982 was. So I'd love to connect with you on Twitter going forward. It's been one of my great honors in life to be a Golden Bear. And so I'd like to take not a lot of time, but take some time and share with you some of the experiences I had during my 4 years at Cal. And these aren't necessarily things that were significant to me, but maybe more so things that I think you will find interesting as I share them. My dad was career Navy. His last billet was in Alameda, California. And so when I was in about 7th grade, he retired from the service and we moved to San Jose, just down south. And I played football through high school, and my senior year, I had dozens of schools recruiting me at the quarterback position. In the back of my mind, I knew it was going to be either Stanford or Cal. And so during my senior year, I went to football games during the 1976 season at both Memorial Stadium and over in Stanford. I know I went to at least 2 or 3 games at Berkeley during that year, but the only one that sticks in my mind was the big game in 1976. Now, I need to tell you that back then I had a red flannel sweatshirt that I wore as kind of my light weather jacket, cool weather jacket. And for whatever reason, and obviously I didn't put a whole lot of thought into this, but the day of the big game, I got up and I put a shirt on and I grabbed my flannel sweatshirt and headed up to Memorial Stadium to see the Cal Stanford game. I was in the Cal locker room before the game. I heard Mike White's pep talk. And at that point, I don't know that I was wearing my sweatshirt, but when I got down on the field before the game started, I was standing on the sidelines about the 20-yard line. And it was one of those overcast, dank, kind of cold days in Berkeley. And so I put my flannel shirt up, my red flannel shirt. And we got about halfway into the first quarter, and I heard this chant coming from the student section immediately behind me. And it started low, but then it continued to build. And it was, take off that red shirt. Take off that red shirt. And I remember kind of looking around the stadium and thinking to myself, well, I wonder what that's about. Of course, about a minute went by, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, I'm wearing a red shirt. And sure enough, the Cal student section was calling me out. And so I turned around and I went face to face with thousands of Cal students, and I blinked. I took my red sweatshirt off and put on one of their warm-ups. But that was my very first real experience with Cal football and with Cal fans. Later, really like a month or two later, I took my two final recruiting trips. My first one, my second to last one was to Stanford, and my last recruiting trip was to Cal. And there were a couple of things about each of those that stood out to me. In hindsight, I'm still amazed that I spent a weekend at Stanford, and I never was given the chance to meet the other quarterbacks on the Stanford roster, which just seemed odd. Conversely, when I took my recruiting trip to Cal, I spent a lot of the weekend with those other guys, with Charlie Young and Gary Grauman and Eric Anderson. In fact, we played golf together on Sunday, the weekend that I was there. And with about 3 or 4 holes to go, Joe Roth walked out of the clubhouse, and I had a chance to meet him and chat with him. And that was really it was only about 2 or 3 weeks before he passed. I know the people around Joe knew how serious his condition was. I didn't know at the time, and so when he passed 3 weeks later, that for me was just a real shock. And I remember a few days after that coming up to the memorial service for him on the Berkeley campus. I've never been in a place where there was so much sadness. Joe was just a great quarterback, and man, could he spin that football. He was a beloved guy, just for all of his greatness. He was a humble guy. And for an 18-year-old kid like me, there was so much about Joe Roth that made an impression. One of the great honors of my life was after my sophomore year. I started as a quarterback as a sophomore. After my sophomore year, my teammates voted me the Joe Roth Award winner for that season. That was the second Joe Roth Award that the Cal football team had given away. And that was a great honor that they would think that highly of me, to recognize some qualities in me that reflected those same qualities in Joe. So I chose Cal. When it came down to it, it really wasn't a tough decision at all. I chose Cal and started my freshman year. My first season at Berkeley was in 1977. There were 5 quarterbacks on the roster. I mentioned the other 3. Charlie Young had been the starter the year before, had a good season. Eric Anderson had played in some games. Gary Grauman had played in some games. All three of these guys were really good, and probably could have started at most colleges around the country. I mean, it was that competitive. We also had, there was me, and there was a fifth quarterback by the name of Art West, who had come from Montana. And for the life of me, I'm still trying to figure out how a quarterback from Montana ended up at Berkeley, but he was on the roster. He was a scholarship guy just like me. There were 5 of us, and our opener my freshman year was in Knoxville against Tennessee. And the coaches early in training camp told us that they were going to take 4 quarterbacks on that inaugural trip to Tennessee. So it was between me and Art. We also happened to room together. Now, the thing that was really unique about Art was he looked like, and he could sing like Elvis. In fact, during training camp that first year, all the freshmen had to do something by way of showing whatever talents they had. Art did an Elvis song, complete with wardrobe and everything. And I promise you, you would have thought Elvis was in the building. It was that compelling. Well, we're in training camp for a couple weeks. Art and I are competing for this 4th coveted traveling spot. And do you remember what happened in August of 1977? More specifically, August 17th, 1977.
Elvis died.
Elvis died. Art West wasn't just an Elvis impersonator. He was an Elvis aficionado and a soulmate, if you will. And so Elvis died, and Art literally went in the tank for the next week or two. Hey, being a competitive guy, I used that opportunity to cement myself as the 4th quarterback on the roster. And I ended up making the trip to Tennessee for the opener. Of course, three weeks later, we played Missouri away, and Art made that trip and I stayed home. The one thing I remember about that first game against Tennessee, 90,000 people all dressed in orange. I'm a freshman running out with the Cal football team. We go through warm-ups. We're lining up on the sideline for the kickoff. I remember going up to head coach Mike White. I was so excited. And I ran up to Coach White and I said, Coach White, if you need me today, I'm ready. And in hindsight, I'm sure Coach White was thinking to himself, Rich, if we need you today, we're really screwed. They didn't need me. Somehow we ended up beating Tennessee, as I recall. That was one of the highlights of my freshman year. I did actually play in one game. We were killing San Jose State. And I came in and I threw 3 passes. I completed 1 for 2 yards. That was the extent of my freshman year. It actually cost me a red shirt, and I'm not quite sure, looking back, if that was a good thing or a bad thing, because my senior, I started for the next 3 years. My senior year, I injured my knee late in the season. At that point, I don't know if I would have wanted another season or not. So it's kind of a debatable issue. But that was my freshman year. That Cal team went 7-4, which is really an envious record for a lot of college coaches. But for whatever reason, Mike White, the head coach who had recruited me, was fired at the end of the season. At the time, I really didn't know what to think of that. One of his assistants, Roger Theater, was named the head coach. And I realize now that it was a fortuitous decision for me, because for whatever reason, Roger Theater was a Rich Campbell guy. Roger Theater he loved me. And come my sophomore year in training camp, even with those other three really good quarterbacks on the roster, Roger took a chance on Rich Campbell, and he jumped me ahead of them and made me the starting quarterback my sophomore year. Our first game that year was against Nebraska in Lincoln, another stadium filled, this time with red, people all in red. And we lost the game. I think the final score was 36-26. But I played really well, threw a couple touchdown passes, had a few other touchdown passes dropped. I remember I completed an 80-yard bomb to Holden Smith to start the second half. But it was proof. It was proof for me that I could play at that level, to be able to play against Nebraska in their building and play well. My sophomore year started great. We went 4-1. Then we had a debacle of a national game against UCLA on national TV. And we kind of struggled the rest of the season, but we finished the year 6-5, lost the big game. So, there wasn't really a whole lot of redeeming value to my sophomore season. My junior year came around, and we ended up going 6-5 that year, and ended up going to the Garden State Bowl, where we played against and lost to Temple. But I wanted to mention a couple things that occurred during my junior year. Some not necessarily football related, but I think you'll find them interesting. I got to tell you about the incident involving the hang glider, right? We were playing USC in Berkeley, very close game, like 14-10 in the third quarter. USC punted to us, and so the teams are changing, and I'm running onto the field. The ball's at the other end of the field at about the 25, and I'm running to our huddle, and I hear this buzz in the stadium. It's the only kind of buzz that you hear when something on the field is actually occurring on the field. But it was enough of a buzz to make me stop and look. And if I hadn't stopped and looked, I may have been beheaded, because a guy in a hang glider with USC colors apparently had been circling the perimeter of the stadium in the first half. And with the break in the action, he decided that he was gonna land on the field. So I remember looking up, and when I saw him, he was at the just over the goalpost at the south end of the field, and he literally came about 5 feet off the ground, his left wing right over me. So if I'd been standing, he'd have just clipped me and knocked me out. And I've always wondered, clearly the guy had hang gliding skills. At the time there were two theories about what happened. One theory was the guy was hang gliding in the area, got in trouble, and needed to land in the stadium. Well, I happen to think that theory is just a bunch of crap. The guy had too many hang gliding skills. And he just decided early on at some point he was going to land on the field. And so with the break in the action, he saw his opportunity and came in, made a great landing, kind of touched down, right at the opposite end zone, and then was immediately escorted out by security. But I've always wondered, if the guy would have gotten out with his life if he'd actually clipped me. If you'd taken out Cal's starting quarterback during the middle of a really close game against USC, I don't think the guy would have survived. My teammates would have killed him, and if not, the fans would have. But it was one of those moments that looking back, I'm delighted that I was a part of it. I'm glad I didn't get injured. It's really funny though, because 40 years later, and this was 3 years ago, I was chatting with somebody, this couple that I knew when I was living down in Florida, and one of their kids had been on YouTube and had somehow pulled up the hang glider game, and he had asked his mom, do you know anything about this? And she looked closer, and she knew that I had played at Berkeley, and she put 2 and 2 together, and yeah, that was me. That was me. Luckily I didn't get killed that day. So that was an interesting thing that happened my junior year. Of course, everybody this week in the Bay Area has been talking about what the weather's going to be like up in Pullman this week for the game with Washington State. My junior year, we played Washington State late in the season. It was sometime in November. I don't remember if it was the game immediately before the big game or 2 games before. But the weather was similar to, I think, what it's going to be this Saturday. It was in the mid to low 30s, and there were some snow flurries. But that's cold for California kids. And so the night before the game, Eric Anderson, one of the other quarterbacks who I roomed with, Eric was watching. We're sitting in our hotel room in Pullman, and Eric's watching the weather report, and he turns to me and he says, "Man," he says, "it's going to be cold tomorrow." He said, "We need to go get something." So Eric called a taxi, and we went over to the nearest mall, and we spent 30 minutes, trying to find the biggest pair of women's nylons that we could. And we're successful in acquiring said women's nylons and wore those the next day, and they definitely did help. But that was one of the highlights of the trip to Pullman. The other thing I remember about that particular game, and it's funny, when I think back to individual games, there's almost always something like what I'm about to share with you that comes to my mind. We ended up winning. We ended up beating the Cougars that day. I was responsible for 3 touchdowns, and one of those was a quarterback sneak. And the thing I remember about that was I snuck into the end zone, and of course there's this big pile that I'm on the bottom of, and the officials called the touchdown. But there was one of the players for the Cougars was laying almost on top of me, and it's like we're face to face. And he's for whatever reason, he wasn't trying to hit the ball. For whatever reason, he's slugging me in the stomach. You have no idea what occurs at the bottom of those piles. And because we're face to face, and I see his arm moving like this. Because we're face to face, I said, "Dude, what are you doing?" Just one of those special football memories that flash into your head, even 40 years after the fact. Of course, the highlight of my junior year was the big game, and the much talked about catch by Joe Rose in the back of the end zone. Couple things I want to mention about that. The score at the time was 14-14. We were playing over at Stanford. There was about 7.5 minutes to play, and we had the ball down around the 15-yard line going into the end zone. We're already in field goal territory. We got the best field goal kicker, Nick Luckhurst, in the country. I've already thrown an interception in the end zone, and I'm not going to do it in this situation. So on 2nd and 8 or whatever, we call a pass play, and I drop back to pass. And as it turns out, on this particular route that we called, Joe was really the tight end was really the only receiver that was running vertical. The other receivers were going down and coming across the field, but he was the only one running up the field. And honestly, of all the times that we called that play, and it was sprint 52, I don't ever remember a time when the ball went to the tight end. We never threw the ball to the tight end on that particular play. But because of the defense they were in, because of the circumstances, Joe Rose, the tight end, became the only person who was going to get the ball if anybody was going to get the ball. I threw it to the back of the end zone, and my plan was if Joe can't get it, then nobody's going to get it. We'll kick a field goal and go ahead. He makes the catch, and he's clearly in bounds, but the official who made I think was responsible for the call, called him out. And the reason they called him out was because some genius of a groundkeeper over at Stanford had decided to paint a parallel line 18 inches inside the end of the end zone, which really confused the officials. And so Roger Theater's hearing from our coaches up in the press box, and they're telling him, hey, the guy blew the call. And so Roger, to his credit, and he called a timeout. And in hindsight, this may be one of the greatest uses of a timeout in college football history, because he called the timeout, not so much to tell the officials what he thought, but to give the officials a chance to confer with one another. Here's how I think it went down. I think the guy who was responsible for the call called it incorrectly. He thought Joe had stepped outside. The guy misread the boundary, basically. But with the timeout called, the other officials then got together with him, and I suspect there were at least two other officials. If it had just been one other official saying, no, you got it wrong, I don't think they would have reversed the call. I'm pretty sure it had to be at least two who came together with that third official and said, hey, you didn't see this right. Look at the way the line's printed, the painted there. This particular play was a topic of conversation for us on Twitter too, with a couple weeks back with the approach of the game. And a lot of people who are commenting went online on YouTube and viewed the play and watched Barry Tompkins' call of the play. And as Leslie Mitchell so astutely pointed out, everything about Barry Tompkins' call of that particular play was just blatantly incorrect. His initial call was that Joe Rose was definitely out of the end zone. And then a few seconds later, after the timeout's been called, oh, it's clear that Roger Theater's upset at Rich Campbell for calling that timeout. I didn't call timeout. Roger called the timeout. And thank goodness he did, because it changed the whole course of the game. But that play, to be involved in a play like that, in a game like that, knowing how important the axe is to the people at both of those universities, it's one of the great memories of my life. And I guess the other thing about that is just the sheer surprise that the call was reversed. That literally never happened when I played football. This was years before instant replay. Back then, if an official made a call, the call stood. There was no discussing among themselves. But to their credit, they got it right. And as I said, it changed the whole outcome of the game. Well, those are some of the highlights of my career and related stories. I actually want to close with what I consider the finale, my all-time favorite Cal story. And this occurred years later after I graduated in 2004. In 2004, I was living in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, which is the home of the University of Southern Mississippi. And the reason this particular memory is so poignant to me is because my daughter, who was 18 at the time, had the chance to share it with me. So just quickly, in 2004, Cal was scheduled to play the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg in September of that year. It was Aaron Rodgers' junior year, his last year at Cal. So they were scheduled to play like the second week in September. But a hurricane came into the Gulf. I forget which one it was, but it came up through Alabama. It kind of grazed us in Mississippi, but it was enough of a threat to force them to reschedule the game, which they did to December 4th of that year. Well, the week prior to the game, the media in the Bay Area got wind of the fact that former Cal quarterback Rich Campbell was living in Hattiesburg. I was working as an editorial page editor and opinion columnist at a Gannett newspaper there. But the media got wind of me living in the town, in the city that the Bears were coming to. So I became a celebrity again for a few days. Did 3 or 4 interviews with columnists in the Bay Area. And of course, word then got to the folks at Cal. So I was asked to speak in chapel for the Bears that Saturday morning, which I did, which was the first time that I had the chance to meet Aaron. Aaron was in chapel that day. And then the game was that night. So I got some tickets for my daughter and I to go to the game. And we also invited my daughter's high school basketball coach named Missy and her husband Chip. We met them at the game. But before the game, I was invited. One of the Cal Booster Club's alumni groups had traveled there in mass. It turned out there seemed to be 150, 200 Cal people at the game. So I was invited to speak to that group before the game, just outside the stadium. They'd set up rows of chairs under a tent, and from my view, it looked like there were 150, 200 people there. But the athletic director invited me and asked me to say a few words. So I stepped forward and I got a standing ovation. And I thought, man, I don't know if that's deserved, but boy, does it feel good to be recognized by these folks. So that meant a lot to me. And of course, my 18-year-old daughter's there. My football career was over a long time before, she came around. So for her, this was kind of seeing Dad in a whole different lens here. At halftime of the game, which Cal ended up winning, at halftime of the game, my daughter and I went up into the press box and did the interview with the Cal announcing team. So that was also fun. But during the game, my daughter and her basketball coach, who were big fans of Counting Crows, the rock band, had noticed that Jason Duritz was on the Cal sidelines during the game, I guess providing color because he had a microphone and was walking around on the sidelines doing color for the game. Jason was the front man for Counting Crows, and my daughter was a huge fan. So throughout the game, I hear Missy and Meredith, my daughter, saying, "Hey, we need to try and get Jason's autograph." Okay. So the game ends, and the 4 of us walk down to the Cal, where the Cal teams go into the locker room, and we're on one side of this chain link fence, and the Cal players are walking up this path on the other side. And last but not least, coming down the path is Jason, the front man for Counting Crows. And he kind of gets parallel to us. And my daughter, or Missy, her coach, yelled out, hey, can we get an autograph? Can we get an autograph? So Jason walks over, and my daughter hands him a piece of paper and a pen through the chain link fence. And as Jason's signing it, Missy's husband turns to him and points to me. And he said, Jason, do you know who that is? And of course, Jason has no idea who I am. He looks at me and just kind of wags his head. And Chip says, that's former Cal quarterback Rich Campbell. What happened next is one of the greatest moments of my life. Jason hands the paper and pen back to my daughter. He walks down through a gate and comes back up to where we're standing in front of the chain link fence. He puts out his hand and he says, Mr. Campbell, he said, I want you to know what an honor it is to meet you. He said, you were one of my all-time favorite quarterbacks when I grew up in Berkeley. And the chance to shake your hand now is an honor for me. And I remember looking over at my daughter, whose chin was on the ground, knowing in her head that she's thinking to herself, the lead singer for Counting Crows thinks my dad's cool. And that was one of the all-time best moments for this former Cal quarterback. Well, that's all that I plan to say. If anybody has any questions, I'll give them a shot.
Rich, great stories. Thanks so much. And we do have questions. And I was going to say that the first question actually came in about 5 or 10 minutes before you even started your talk. But actually and I was going to throw it over to Tom to ask the question. However, I just remembered that actually the first question for you came in, probably a week, close to a week ago from Les. Emailed me a question. Les, can you unmute and ask your question if you remember what it was? Let me unmute you. I can unmute you. There you go. Go ahead, Russ.
Okay, am I on?
You're on.
Sure.
Oh, Rich, class of 60, but I still remember when you and Pat, what was his name? Pat, the lineman from San Jose too. Graham.
Pat Graham.
You two, 4-star all-stars signed with Cal, and I was so happy. And I was wondering about, you said, a dozen schools were after you.
Right.
Did you get a lot of negative recruiting from other schools that you shouldn't go to Cal for whatever reason? Like maybe the faculty's not sympathetic, or students are all nerds and they don't care about football, or, things like that, that maybe they try to convince you Cal's not the school for you.
No, I didn't hear anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was curious about that. I've kind of heard about some of that going on.
Yeah, most of the recruiting, at least as I remember it, schools stressed what they had to offer. I think they were wise enough not to talk down other programs.
Okay.
So I didn't hear much of that at all.
Oh. Glad you picked Cal over Stanford.
Me too.
I think all of us are. All right, thanks, Les. Tom, you had a question. You want to unmute and?
I will, and I'd just like to say it's wonderful to meet Rich Campbell, even if it's virtually, and to thank you for telling the hang glider story, because I was at that game, and I remember you did duck as he came in for a perfect landing near the end zone. And I'm awful glad he didn't hit you. And I hate to think what would happen to somebody who tried that today.
Yeah.
But I was interested, the gentleman from the Palouse was talking about 65 passing attempts. And I remember you throwing a lot of passes at Cal. And I was wondering what your highest number of passing attempts in a Cal game was, and also what you thought your best game as a quarterback at Cal was.
The first question's easy because I think was it Gary that referenced it already. We opened my senior year against the Gators down in Tampa. And I completed 43 of 53 passes that day for 400 and some yards. You know, we went between the 20 and the 20 like you've never seen, but then couldn't put the ball in the end zone. So it was a really frustrating day. 53, I guess, would be the answer to most attempts. I'd almost have to give your second question some thought. It's easy to point to the big game in '79. I played really well in the first half, threw a couple interceptions in the second half that I recall, but then made the big play when I needed to. That would be one that I'd point to. One other one, I guess, that I'd want to mention. I guess it was my junior year. We opened against Arizona State down in Tempe. I'd been recruited by them. My best friend, who was a year ahead of me in high school, he'd actually gone to, he was at ASU. So, you know, it was one of those games where you wanted to play really well just because of things that were going on behind the scenes. We ended up winning 17-9. We didn't put up a lot of points. Our defense played great, but we went down and beat a good Frank Cush team in their house, and that was another one that I felt really good about. Good question though, Tom.
Yeah, Rich, you talked a little bit before about 2004, and we all remember that game against Southern Miss that had been played earlier. I think we good chance we would have been in the Rose Bowl that year. But you mentioned that you were the editorial page editor, and Peter, you have a question regarding that.
So, Rich, you have meant a great deal to me. Not that you knew that over the last 16 years, because when you were the editorial page editor of the Hattiesburg American, you wrote an essay about your daughter coming home at either Thanksgiving or Christmas after her first semester of college, and your realization that her childhood home was not home anymore. It really touched me as my daughter went away to school that same fall, and I realized I was experiencing the same emotions. Is it printed anywhere, or could you send me a copy? It has meant a great deal to me.
Offhand, I don't know where that might exist, but I will definitely conduct the search and see if I can find it.
That would be fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, Patty. You had a question for Rich. You able to unmute?
Okay, I think I'm okay now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, you know me in Zoom.
Yes, I know.
Where was my comment? Oh, Rich, I met James Warsnop this afternoon. And I was going to get, I was thrown off what day of the week it was. I thought our meeting was tomorrow. I was going to get him the link. But he lives in Rescue, California now. And I'm sure that he would love to reconnect with you. He was very much looking forward to watching the meeting this afternoon, and now he'll have to watch it on our website, or I think there's a way to do that, though.
Yes.
Somebody's going to have to show me how to do that. But he had some really nice things to say about you and Coach Emilio, and I'm trying to think of all the names that we Rose, of course, and Ralph Deloach, and all the names that I knew from
Right.
100 years ago. So anyway, I'm going to put him in touch with you, and he says he goes to the games with Steve Poss, who is
Okay.
a member of our club, but I don't know, Steve must have a work conflict because I don't think that I've seen him on Zoom yet. But anyway, he sends his best.
Well, I will look forward to chatting with him.
Okay.
All right, Paul, you had a question.
Hi, Rich. By the way, I was also at that game with Tom, not with him at the moment, but with the hang glider and all that. That was a pretty exciting moment, actually. Actually, the question I put into chat was about the run and shoot offense, but then I did a quick search and discovered that you missed that by 1 year, I believe, right? With Mouse Davis as the OC.
When was he the OC at Berkeley?
81.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you missed it by a
80,
year.
80 was my last year there.
Okay, so I have a different question to ask you, if I may. I also discovered before the call that there was an article about you in the SI last year.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a pretty thoughtful article about your experience in the pros and how you look back upon it and what you learned from it. And would you care to, was it an accurate article, and would you comment on it?
It was very accurate. I've never done an interview that extensive with a journalist. I was a journalist for 24 years, and I've interviewed people extensively. But that particular day, I probably spent 90 minutes on the phone with that writer from Sports Illustrated. And he asked me some questions I've never been asked in interviews before. And actually drew some things out of me that maybe I had not even come to terms with in my own football career. But the upshot of that particular interview and article was the conclusion that as I look back on my professional career, which was very frustrating, I never felt like I really had an opportunity to show my talents in Green Bay. But that as I've looked back with the perspective of years and the medical recognition of things like CTE and the potential causes of dementia and Alzheimer's, and the fact that so many guys that I played with back then that had really successful careers have artificial knees and artificial hips, and others are suffering memory loss and that kind of thing. The realization I've come to is that, in a lot of ways it was a blessing I didn't have an NFL career. And I say that as honest as the day is long. I could have played 10, 15 years. But what kind of body would I have then? So there's just, having looked back on the way my career didn't go, I've just really been able to see a lot of blessing in not being an Aaron Rodgers and not being a guy that played for 10 or 15 years. That's a great question, Paul. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
And Leslie, you have a question.
Uh-oh.
I know. Be careful, Rich.
Why don't you just, Leslie, why don't you just tweet it at me?
Leslie, you're muted.
You're still muted. There you go. There you go.
It's nice to finally see you, Rich, after having tweeted at you all this time.
It is.
My question is about, everyone was talking about the weather today, you know, up in Pullman, and it made me wonder what it was like when you went up to Green Bay from California. Was that like a nightmare? And what's it like to actually try to play football when it's that cold?
It's actually not that hard to play football. The real challenge is for guys that are backups like me who don't get on the field and have to stand on the sidelines for 3 hours in that kind of weather. That's the really difficult part. Honestly, with the weather, you're freezing when you first get out there, but once you start moving around, and if you're playing in the game, you really don't notice it. Now, that's down to a certain temperature, okay? That's kind of true down to about 25 degrees. When you get below that, and if there's wind, whether you're moving or not, you feel that the whole day. But less so if you're actually participating in the event. Going to Green Bay was a shock for me. I wasn't used to temperatures that cold. And usually there was one game a year in December at home, where it was 10 to 15 degrees and there was a 20-mile-an-hour north wind, and everything about that was just miserable.
And I had a second question kind of related is, what was the whole experience? I know it's changed a lot over the years, but what was the whole experience of being an NFL first-round draft pick like for you? Was it all the hype and everything we have now? Was it like that?
It was still hyped, but not anything like it is today. The year I was drafted in '81 was actually the very first year that ESPN televised the draft. In fact, I've got a really funny, quick story about that. I took 5 or 6 trips to different teams before the draft that were interested in taking me in the first round. For example, I went to New York with the Jets. I went to LA with the Rams. I went to St. Louis. The Cardinals were there then. And then 3 or 4 teams came to Berkeley and worked me out. But the day of the draft, the Cardinals had the 5th pick in the first round, right before the Packers. And I remember watching it on TV. My folks were living in Sunnyvale then, so I'd travel down to Sunnyvale to their house to watch the game, or to watch the draft on ESPN. The Cardinals were on the clock and they had 15 minutes, and they used almost all their time. And then they drafted EJ Jr., a linebacker from Alabama. And then the Packers were on the clock and our phone rang, and I answered it, and the gal on the other end of the line said, I'm Bart Starr's secretary. Would you hold for Coach Starr, please? So I knew momentarily the Packers were going to draft me. Well, what I found out years later, and this was in a book, one of the books that Coach Starr had written, the Cardinals had a policy at the time that they would not draft a player unless at that very moment they could get a hold of them on the phone. And because I was at my folks' house and not at my apartment in Berkeley, where I had a different phone. And of course, this was a couple decades before cell phones. They didn't have my number. They had every intention of taking me with the 5th pick. But when they couldn't get a hold of me, they passed and they took EJ Jr. and the Packers took me. Well, I have always wondered, hey, what could have been in St. Louis? I know what happened in Green Bay. What could have been in St. Louis? But it's just another one of those situations where you kind of give it over to God and trust that he knew what he was doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, Greg, you're up.
All right, thanks, Gary. Rich, I think, but I'm not sure that hurricane in 2004 was Hurricane Ivan, is what I'm thinking.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Myself and a large group of people did come down to that game from the Bay Area. I remember that the game obviously was supposed to be earlier in the year, it got rescheduled to December.
Right.
I think unfortunately it made that game just of hyped up importance because it was at the end of the season.
Right.
And I think the close win was not enough. And we all know what happened a day or two later when Mac Brown bit us out of the Rose Bowl. But
right.
Anyway, so my question is, so the couple years before that year, a couple years after that, Tedford had us on the top, national recognition. We were in the running every year for the Pac-10. So I just, obviously you've stayed pretty connected with Cal football and watching it. I just wondered what your thoughts were on where we currently are with the direction of the program under Coach Wilcox.
Greg, to be honest, I don't know that I could speak with much insight or authority on that issue. I've gotten a lot. I've always watched the program from a distance. This year, because I've reconnected with so many Cal people, I've been a lot more active in terms of following the program and reading news stories and keeping abreast now. I know how big it was to win the big game last year.
Yeah.
I'm impressed with what I see from Chase Garbers. I think he's got everything that the team needs for them to be a really good football team. I like the way he plays. I wish they'd throw the ball downfield a little more. That's one thing I felt as I've watched 2 or 3 of the games this year. Really seems like the defense at times is just squatting on receivers and really just challenging them to put the ball up. I think that would definitely be helpful. But to make any broader judgments about the direction of the program, maybe ask me that in a year. But at this point, I don't think I could do it justice.
I know this year would be a tough one to judge anyway, so.
That's another thing. I find myself shaking my head when I see what these players are having to deal with. When Cal's game got scheduled or got canceled and then rescheduled, 36 hours before against another opponent, I was sitting there trying to imagine how that would work out practically. Here you've been preparing most of the week for this opponent, and all of a sudden now you're playing this opponent.
Yeah.
This is not baseball or basketball. It's a lot more complex than that, and teams do so many things different from other teams that those kind of scenarios are just lose-lose. So my heart really goes out to the coaches and the players who are having to deal with this.
Yeah, that UCLA game didn't turn out so well.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take one more question here. David.
Here I'm in Vacaville, California, and I was just wondering, did you like playing when you were the underdog, and how did point spreads affect your performance? Did you try and run up the score or keep it close and honorable?
I always loved playing as the underdog. I couldn't tell you one thing about point spreads because when I played, I never looked at them. We were told to make sure that we stayed away from anything even resembling the gaming betting industry. And I do remember an instance in one of my classes when a fellow student kind of cozied up to me, and I really had the sense he was trying to get information from me about our opponent that week. And I was smart enough to recognize that, and didn't say anything.
So no Art Schuster, like the Ohio State guy.
No. Is he still in prison?
I think so. I don't know. And then when Mike White left, Cal got put on probation. I think it was 1999, or it was before you or after you. I can't remember. Do I have my facts right? I'm not sure. We had a player, Wesley Walker or Michael Ainsworth, somebody that didn't graduate or played without good grades or something. I don't know.
Okay, we were not, the 4 years that I was there, we were not on probation, so I can't speak specifically to that.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that's it for the questions. Rich, this has been fantastic. This has been great. The stories were terrific. Thanks so much for being with us. Now, in your answer to Greg's question, you said you have to answer next year. So that means you have to come back next year to answer his question. So, we're looking forward to that. Okay. So again, thanks so much for joining us. This has been great. And I hope you join back up with us.
Thanks, folks. And again, I'd love to connect with you on Twitter if you're on Twitter. And Leslie, thank you especially.
Yeah, and I put your Twitter handle into the chat, so take a look. It's in there somewhere. I know we had a number of questions, but it's in there, so you can grab it off of that if you want to connect up with Rich. And then I also would like to thank Leslie for setting this up. This is Leslie put us in touch and got this together for us, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
And Go Bears! Go Bears. And with that, be sure to sign up and register for Marissa Nichols on Monday. And until then, I will see you. And as if you could forget, 7:30 this Saturday on FS1, our game against Washington State. So with that, good night, everybody, and thanks for joining us. And we will see you. Okay. Dave wants to know, Rich, do you have a score prediction for this week? I don't know if you're asking Rich or me, Dave.
Bears by 10.
Bears by 10.
Nice.
I like it.
All right.
All right. Okay. Well, again, thanks everybody, and good night. And we'll see you on Monday. Go Bears.
Thank you, Rich.
Go Bears. Thank you,
Go
Rich.
Bears.
Go Bears.
Thank you.
Go Bears.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay. Thanks, Ray.
Yeah.
Another good one.
Yep.
Yeah. You gonna be able to sign on Monday?
That's the plan.
Okay. Good. Yep. All right. Sounds good.
Thanks again, Rich.
All right. Thanks.
How's everyone doing, Greg?
Thank you.
We're doing good. I love being in lockdown.